Welcome to the Pastors and Money podcast. I'm Joy Suzanne Hunt, pastor and financial coach, bringing you conversations about personal finance, church finance, and how we disciple our churches in the areas of finance and stewardship. You can find the episode show notes and more at pastorsandmoney.com. And here's the show. Hi there. Welcome to episode 13 of the Pastors and Money podcast. This episode is part 2 of my conversation with Pastor Brian Bush about church budgets. If you haven't listened to part 1 in episode 12, I encourage you to go back and check it out first. Today we'll be diving deeper into practical steps for implementing healthy budgeting practices in your church. Before we get to the interview, I want to share something I've been reflecting on lately. In a recent series at my church, we explored the story of Daniel and his role in the government. And what struck me was how Daniel lived as a separated servant, fully involved in his work for the Babylonian and Persian governments, even though those were pagan governments worshiping other gods. And yet he maintained a distinct holy lifestyle. They knew him as being the best at his job, even in that secular environment. They also knew him as being wholly dedicated to his God. This got me thinking about how we as churches should approach our ministry and our finances. We're called to be fully engaged in our communities, in how we manage our resources, even in dealing with things like the IRS. But while we use good practices, and if somebody were to look at how we manage things, they should say, hey, that's the best way to do it. Our practices should look distinctly different from those of the world around us. This idea of being in the world but not of it when it comes to finances leads perfectly into today's episode. We'll be hearing from Sara Whitehurst, a missionary to Thailand, in our Missionary Spotlight segment. Sara has been serving in Thailand for 10 years, working at an after-school community center and teaching English to share the gospel. Her story is a powerful example of how our financial stewardship as churches can have a global impact while maintaining our distinct identity as followers of Christ.
Hello, I'm Sara Whitehurst. I'm missionary to Thailand, and I have been a missionary for 13 years. In Thailand, I work at an after-school community center in the mountains of northern Thailand. And there we share the gospel through teaching English. We do community outreaches. And I'm excited to share with you that we've recently launched a church. We've had several people get baptized, and the Lord is really on the move in this village. So my day-to-day kind of looks like 1 or 2 days a week. I help teach English at the local government school that's next to the community center. And then after school, I go to the community center, like I said, where we teach English and connect with the kids there. On Saturdays, there's a program where more kids who go to different schools during the day can come together. So we do that in the mornings on Saturdays, and then 2 Sundays a month, we have a church where around 20 people come and just seek the Lord and trying to learn more about Christianity or to deepen their faith. Buddhism is very spiritually dark. Through a lot of rituals and things, people invite evil spirits to possess them. And so there is a lot of just spiritual opposition to Christianity. There's a lot of opposition through the temples, the monks, local officials, things like that. But it hasn't stopped the Lord from moving. It sometimes feels like a slow process, but when the Lord wants something to happen, it happens quickly. So I'm just excited to be part of what he's doing there and seeing the lives of my students just be transformed and to see Christianity spreading throughout the village. Like I said, I'm home to fundraise. I'm at the tail end of that. I still need a little bit of support left, and then I'll be going back to Thailand for a 4-year term, and just really looking forward to being back there with my kids and some amazing Thai food.
I would love for you to check out Sara's ministry and the work that she's doing. You can learn more about Sara and how you can support her on the mission field at pastorsandmoney.com/spotlight. And as you listen to today's conversation about church budgets, I encourage you to think about how your church can be like Daniel, fully engaged in good financial practices and yet distinctly set apart in your priorities and goals. Let's dive in and explore this together. But so I'm thinking if a pastor's hearing this and they're looking at that budget and that balance is really lopsided, maybe 50% is going to the building. Maybe they aren't able to support their staff, or they feel like they felt the squeeze of not being able to do more outreach or support their mission because of the budget constraints. What are some things that they can do to alleviate that and get it kind of more into balance where it would be a healthier budget?
Sure. And man, I wish I had a magic wand that says, boy, I could fix this with this, you know. But it's really pretty simple. We either got to reduce what the costs are, our physical cost on the buildings, or if we have debt, let's get out of debt. Or we got to raise the amount of money that's coming in. And so there's some different options there. The best option I think that you can do at that point is to figure out how to get people into the church, and let's grow our church. And I know a lot of churches are struggling right now. I know a lot of churches are having a hard time with that. But there's some great news, like millennials and Gen Zs are going back to church. All the statistics that I'm seeing, they are wanting something real in their life. They're searching for it. They want to be a part of it. And so as pastors, we've got to look for those opportunities. How do we reach those people that are searching?
Which is what we're supposed to be doing anyways, right?
Exactly. But sometimes God puts us in those positions where it's difficult, so we'll think outside the box. Mm-hmm. And so if you're struggling, Proverbs is clear. If I don't know what to do, God says ask, and wisdom will be given. And so, it was the same with us, like when we were heavily in debt, like we couldn't even make our building payment because we were so far in debt and we had so little people. And that's when we decided we're going to do something crazy, and that's when we bought the site license for Ramsey Plus. And I'm not trying to do a commercial for this, you know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying this is what we did. And it was crazy because we didn't have the money for it. I had to go raise the money with people, I had to get other people to help, but we had to think outside the box, and we had to think about how to draw people into the church, and not for just one-time event, the people into the church that were going to stay in the church. And let's get those people healthy.
Tell me about what that would look like if we decide, okay, we want to share the budget partly so that we can share, it's a piece of that vision, right?
Right.
How does that look in a practical sense?
Sure. So if I'm starting out as a brand new church, I would want to do a business meeting every quarter, okay? And I would want to bring the whole church together, after a Sunday service or something, or on a weeknight or something, that's outside of the normal service. Hey, here's the business meeting. I want you guys to understand what's going on in our budget. Here's how much money that it was brought in, and here's the things that are our fixed expenses. These are the things that we can't change, all of our necessities. But this is what we did after, when we brought in the next dollars. And I would share the big vision with them. Hey, if we bring in this much more, this is what we're going to spend the next dollars on. And if we bring in this much more, this is what the next money's going for. And start casting that vision of what the goals and the dreams that you believe God has laid on the church's heart and the mission of that. And this is what we're going to do when we get there. And keep them informed. Hey, this is how much we brought in. This is what we did with it. And people get behind that.
So you talk about that, once a quarter business meeting when you're starting a new church. What would that rhythm look like for a church that's established, it's been around, for a couple of years or for a lot of years?
Sure. A lot of churches keep that up. Sometimes that gets a little bit much when you have a whole lot of people. And then you can do it like, once an annual business meeting, or, maybe a biannual business meeting is probably, once you get up to, a larger church, just so people can understand what it's like, and not get overwhelmed. The other thing too that's really good to do, and this is what I would tell anybody, especially a new church starting out, is hire you a bookkeeper that's outside of the church.
A concept.
Right. And most of the time, those accounting firms will come in and do your business meeting for you, You can cast the vision, but they can actually give the numbers of what happened. And I believe that brings accountability and credibility to you as a pastor. And it also brings people peace because they know that somebody outside of yourself is watching the money and they have no connection to the church.
Right. So I'm sure there's somebody listening right now that's, if we share our whole budget with the church body, there's going to be people questioning our decisions. They're going to be questioning how much the pastor gets paid. They're going to be questioning whether we should do this or that. So what would you be able to say to some of those concerns or some of those maybe fears that pastors might have?
If they're going to question it, they're already thinking about it.
Kind of filling in the blanks on their own.
And they're filling in the blanks on their own. That's exactly right. And if they're concerned about that and they get all tied up with that, a couple of things as a pastor we haven't done. We haven't cast the vision well enough. They don't understand what the mission is of the church. They don't understand what our priorities are, because if we cast that vision often, like in our church, we go over our mission statement every week. We go over it every week at the end of the service because I want people to truly understand what our mission and our vision is. And so back to your budgeting here, it starts, a lot of pastors say this, I don't look at what people give. I would tell you, I don't know that that's a good steward as a pastor. And I know that might be harsh, but here's the thing I will say about that. The Bible says we need to know the states of our herds and our flocks. And when you see changes in people's giving, most of the time there's something spiritual going on. And how are we going to help them if we don't know the state of our herd and flocks? If you want your budget to increase, you got to get your families healthy so they're in a position that they feel like they can give. And so it all goes back to mission, vision, and discipling your families. And not being afraid to talk about money. And if you're struggling as a church, not being afraid to tell your people that you're struggling as a church. And get them involved in, hey, we need more families in. And ask them, what can we do to bring families in? Look for opportunities to do that. Look for opportunities to be involved in your community. Go to your local chamber of commerce. Go to your schools. Ask where there's needs at and see if you can meet those needs. So,
did I hear you say that it's not just the lead pastor's job to grow the church?
I did. I said that. Actually, I believe it's the people in the pews' job. The pastor's supposed to equip them to go be disciple makers. Now, a lot of times, what we're feeling like as a pastor, it's my job. That's too big a job for anybody. God put us in this position to equip the saints. Now, the saints need to go do the saintly thing and let's get them inviting people to church and loving on them.
I was thinking about this. I'm reading the book of Acts right now, and I just read from chapter 6, 7, and 8, and so it's the 7, we call them deacons, right? But the 7 that get appointed to oversee the food ministry, and we always think of that as okay, they got appointed for this administrative task, but if you think about it, who are the next 2 chapters about? 2 of those guys going off and preaching. It's, Stephen and Philip.
Right.
And so even though they had this administrative role, even in that, they were still being equipped to go preach. And then they were turning around and equipping others, although Stephen's equipping got cut really short, right? But then he's still equipping us because we're still hearing his story now.
Exactly. And in the short life that he had, equipping the saints, he's equipping us for generations.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's the beauty with doing kingdom work. What we do today affects people in generations down the path. And it's hard to do that. You can't just focus on ministry. There has to be an aspect of it that you focus on the budget so the ministry can happen. because if you can't equip the budget, you can't do the ministry. And so,
Yeah. I remember hearing maybe a month or two ago, I don't remember what the statistic was, but it was a statistic about how many churches that failed. And it wasn't that the church failed, it was that their finances failed.
yep,
And the pastor's personal finances is a piece of that, right?
absolutely.
But that if we don't manage this well, we won't be able to go do all those great things that God has called or positioned us in this place to be able to do.
Right. And I believe too many churches are like this. They start out doing their budget going, "Ah, I know we don't have enough to do this, but we're just praying that God's going to bless us." Well, God does do blessings, okay? And he goes beyond what we are, but he's also give us a brain and a format to where we can go do better and be a good steward with what we have.
Do you think he gave us a brain on purpose?
I think he did, yes. You know what I'm saying? And so let's be the best steward that we can. Like when you look at the parable of God giving the money out to the people, hey, I'm going to give you 5 talents. I'm going to give you 3 talents. Well, the ones that were the good stewards of it are the ones that got more of him.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we want our ministry to grow and be expanded, then let's be a good steward with what God puts in our hands at the beginning,
Right.
and he'll expand that.
And back to what you quoted earlier from it's in Proverbs and it's again in James about, to seek wisdom.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's this piece of that I feel like where I hear people, and I've done it myself, I've caught myself doing this, where I'm asking God for the solution or the miracle. And it's like, okay, but he said in his word that if we asked for wisdom, he would give it to us. So that means there's a point where I have to just go make the choice. Unless, sometimes he'll give you some like, go do this. But often he's already given us, because we've already asked and he is good to his word. He's
Right.
true to his word. He's already given us the wisdom to make that sound decision. And we just have to actually act on it.
Right. And here's the thing, back to the budget, is like when we start doing that initial budget, we start dreaming really, really big. God, if we had $10 million, this is what we would do with it. The funny thing with that is Dave Ramsey talks often about he was dreaming big about financial peace and what God could do. And he wrote it down. And that's the important thing about doing the budget and tying it to your mission and vision and writing it down, that Dave went back years and years later, and financial peace had become all of those things that he thought, if you could only do this. Now, it looked a little bit different to Dave's eyes for what he was seeing back then, but God had fulfilled all of those things. And that's what happens to us. When we start making a plan, God may adjust our plan. As Proverbs says, man has a way that he thinks he's going to go, but God adjusts the direction. And so if we write it down and we're dreaming big and we're in touch with God, we're spending time with him, and so we're praying about what we should do and we're praying to him about our mission, God will fulfill those things. That may not be in our time, but he will do that. And it's amazing how many times those things that you write down come to pass. But writing it down is a big key.
I feel like when you write it down, it forces you to be clear.
Yep.
But also, it forces you to admit that that's really what we want God to do.
Right. And that's a big step. It's a big step. Because it's one thing to say, God, I want you to bring in this much, so I'll go do this. But if we write it down and say, this is what God has put on my heart, this is where we're going, and this is what we're going to do if God does his part here. Well, God will do his part. Now, he may adjust our budget items and our line items or maybe our mission a little bit along the way, but he's going to do his part.
That's good. So what encouragement would you offer to pastors who feel overwhelmed by the financial aspects of doing ministry?
Yeah, that's a great question. Break it down to simple things. Take it a step at a time, Don't try to get overwhelmed. Break it down. Okay, what's our building cost? What does it cost us to run our building every month? Start there. Write that down. And then go to what's our administrative cost? Write that down. What does it cost us to do, our programs and our curriculum? Write that down. What's our staff and our payroll? Because you can do each one of those lines pretty easy. What's our mission and our outreach that we want to do? And what's our tithes and offerings that are coming in? If we'll write those things down, and we'll just do a one by one line, it won't be so overwhelmed. It will help you get a plan and a purpose. And when you start writing it down, you'll also write down everything that you've spent. You got to keep track of the things you spend. And if it's not on your budget, you can't be spending it.
What?
I know. It's crazy. But when you start writing everything down, it really helps you understand the little things that you might be spending money on that you didn't even realize you were spending money on. And those typically end up to be bigger things than you imagine. And so by writing these things down, and you don't spend any money that's not written down, it's going to bring you hope, and it's going to bring you freedom. Because if you got it written down and we're all in agreement of what we're going to do, that brings you freedom to go do what God's called you to do. So the encouragement was start each line. Figure those out. Build it slow. Do what you write down. Don't do anything else.
That's good. Well, as we get ready to wrap up here, Brian, where can people connect with you? And I know that Ramsey has some resources for pastors and churches. What's the best way to get connected?
Yeah, absolutely. They can call 1-800-22-PEACE is our direct line. They can get there. My direct line at Ramsey is 615-850-1388. If you got questions, I'm more than happy to help you anytime with that. Or you can email me at my church email, which is bbush@crossroadsantioch.org. And I'm more than happy to help you. If I don't know the answer, I know somebody that does. So we can get you help.
Awesome. And for the record, it's been about 3 or 4 days since the last time I took advantage of that and picked up the phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for being a resource to our pastors and just being an encouragement for this thing that we don't really get equipped for when we go to Bible college or we go to seminary. And so,
right. They never tell us. They never talk to us about money. And that's one of the biggest things we got to deal with. So, I will say this. We have been working with a lot more seminaries and equipping them with financial peace and having their soon-to-be pastors go through that. And I applaud those seminary that are using that because it does make a big difference.
That's wonderful. What a great tool to have in your toolbox as you're going into a church to go get at least, because if I can't manage my own house,
right,
then I'm going to have a really hard time leading this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it all starts with me right here, and then it builds out. And so I got to get myself prepared. If God's going to use me, I've got to be that vessel that I can be used. And then don't be overwhelmed by the size of the budget. It's still just a budget that's going to bring you freedom.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Pastor Brian, for your time and your effort on the second episode that we've had you on, and I hope there will be more in the future.
Absolutely.
Just look forward to hearing more about what God is doing through you and the work that you're doing out there.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me be a part of this.
And that wraps up our 2-part conversation with Pastor Brian Bush about church budgets. I hope you found these insights helpful as you think about how to manage your church's finances in a way that honors God and furthers your mission. Remember, just like Daniel in Babylon, we're called to be separated servants, fully engaged in good practices, fully engaged in our communities, yet distinctly set apart in our priorities and our goals and the way we do business. As you implement these budgeting principles, keep asking yourself, how can our financial decisions reflect our identity as followers of Christ? How can they help us make a difference in our communities and around the world? And speaking of making a difference around the world, I want to thank Sara again for sharing her missionary work in Thailand with us. If you'd like to learn more about Sara's ministry or support her work, you can find more information and how to support her at pastorsandmoney.com/spotlight. Thank you for listening to today's show. I'd love to know what you think about it. You can leave a comment on the show notes at pastorsandmoney.com/podcast or email me at joy@pastorsandmoney.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. This helps us to get the word out and invite more people into these conversations. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook at Pastors and Money. I can't wait to talk again soon.